Imagine a land that forged kings and queens, survived plagues and revolutions, and built an empire that spanned continents. From mysterious ancient tribes to towering castles and bloody battles that shaped nations, the United Kingdom's story is one of ambition, resilience, and unyielding spirit. Every stone, every crown, every decision echoes through time, influencing the world as we know it today. But what secrets lie behind its mighty walls? And how did a small island transform into a global powerhouse? Stay with us as we unravel the extraordinary history of the United Kingdom, chapter by chapter, and uncover the truths hidden in its past. The history of the United Kingdom is a tale woven across millennia, beginning long before the formation of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland as we know them today. Its story starts with the earliest human settlements, as hunter-gatherers roamed the lush forests and rolling hills of the British Isles. Archaeological discoveries reveal that humans lived here tens of thousands of years ago, leaving behind tools, cave art, and monuments that hint at complex societies and spiritual practices. The Neolithic period introduced farming, permanent settlements, and the construction of iconic megalithic structures such as Stonehenge, whose purpose still sparks debate among historians and archaeologists alike. As time progressed, the Celts emerged as the dominant cultural and political force, shaping the landscape with fortified hill forts and a rich oral tradition. Celtic tribes like the Britons resisted external pressures but eventually encountered one of history's most famous conquerors, Julius Caesar, and later, the Roman Empire. In 43 AD, the Romans launched a full-scale invasion, establishing the province of Britannia. They built roads, forts, and Hadrian's Wall to secure their northern frontier, leaving a lasting imprint on local governance, architecture, and infrastructure. With the Roman withdrawal in the early 5th century, the British Isles plunged into a period of upheaval and transformation. Waves of Anglo-Saxon settlers arrived, bringing new languages, customs, and kingdoms, including Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria. This era saw the blending of cultures, the spread of Christianity, and the beginnings of political structures that would eventually evolve into modern England. Legendary figures such as King Arthur, whether myth or reality, symbolize the struggles of this time, as communities fought to preserve order and identity amid constant threats from invaders like the Vikings. The Viking Age brought both terror and integration. From the late 8th century onward, Norse raiders attacked coastal settlements, but over time, many settled, traded, and married into local communities. The Danelaw region in eastern England became a center of Viking influence, introducing new laws, customs, and skills. Meanwhile, in Scotland and Wales, kingdoms such as Strathclyde and Gwynedd resisted foreign incursions while forging their own distinct identities. The Norman conquest of 1066 dramatically reshaped the United Kingdom's political and social landscape. William the Conqueror defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings, asserting Norman dominance over England. This conquest introduced feudalism, centralized governance, and monumental architecture, including the Tower of London, which would become symbols of authority and control. Norman influence extended beyond England, affecting law, language, and culture for centuries to come. During the Middle Ages, the UK was embroiled in internal and external conflicts. The Plantagenet dynasty oversaw the Magna Carta's signing in 1215, a milestone in constitutional history, guaranteeing certain rights and limiting royal power. The 100 Years' War with France and the Wars of the Roses further tested the resilience of the British Isles, ultimately leading to the rise of the Tudor dynasty. Henry VIII's reign redefined religion in England through the English Reformation, breaking from the Catholic Church and establishing the Church of England. Meanwhile, Scotland and Wales maintained their own struggles for independence and identity, which would only gradually integrate into the United Kingdom centuries later. The Stuart period brought both cultural flourishing and political crisis. James I, Charles I, and the eventual English Civil War highlighted tensions between monarchy and parliament, culminating in the execution of a king and the temporary establishment of the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 restored a constitutional monarchy, setting the stage for modern parliamentary democracy. Meanwhile, Advancements in science, philosophy, and literature during the Enlightenment enriched British intellectual life and global influence. The Industrial Revolution transformed the United Kingdom from a predominantly agrarian society into the world's foremost industrial power. Cities grew, innovations in textile manufacturing, steam power, and transportation reshaped society, and Britain became the workshop of the world. This period also laid bare the inequalities of industrialization, prompting social reform, labor movements, and urban planning that shaped modern life. Simultaneously, the British Empire expanded, with colonies spanning Africa, Asia, and the Americas, establishing economic dominance while leaving a complex legacy of cultural exchange, exploitation, and conflict. The 20th century tested the United Kingdom through war, economic upheaval, and social change. World Wars I and II demanded immense sacrifice and reshaped global geopolitics, solidifying Britain's role as a world leader. The post-war era saw decolonization, the creation of the welfare state, and the integration of diverse communities, transforming the social fabric of the nation. Technological progress from aviation to digital innovation, coupled with cultural influence in music, literature, and media, ensured that the United Kingdom remained prominent on the global stage. In recent decades, debates over identity, sovereignty, and international relations have continued to shape the United Kingdom's narrative. The formation of the devolved governments of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, combined with questions surrounding Brexit, illustrate the ongoing tension between unity and regional autonomy. Modern Britain navigates a world of economic interdependence, technological revolution, and cultural diversity, carrying centuries of history that continue to influence decisions and aspirations. Throughout all these epochs, the United Kingdom's story is defined by resilience, adaptation, and influence. From ancient tribes to modern democracy, from castles to industrial cities, from exploration to empire, the British Isles have played a central role in shaping human civilization. Its history is a mirror of ambition, conflict, creativity, and transformation, reflecting both triumphs and trials. Understanding this rich tapestry provides not only insight into Britain's past, but also a lens through which to view the forces shaping our world today. Now, we want to hear from you. Which period of UK history fascinates you most? Comment below, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for the full journey through time as we explore every chapter of the United Kingdom's remarkable story. The United Kingdom, a cluster of islands off the northwestern coast of mainland Europe, is much more than its green rolling hills, misty moors, or majestic castles. Its history is a vast and intricate tapestry woven over thousands of years, shaped by the clash of tribes, invasions of foreign powers, dynastic rivalries, and the ambitions of extraordinary leaders. From its earliest inhabitants who left behind stone tools and burial mounds, to the mighty empires that once spanned continents, the story of the UK is both unique and influential on a global scale. Geographically, the British Isles consist of 4 nations: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and each has a distinct cultural, political, and linguistic identity, yet they are bound together in a shared history marked by triumph, turbulence, and transformation. England, the largest of the 4, became the political and economic heart of the United Kingdom, while Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland maintained unique traditions and struggles, often resisting domination and striving to assert their own autonomy. Understanding the UK requires appreciating these regional differences and the interplay between them over centuries. The earliest settlers were hunter-gatherers who traversed the landscape during the Paleolithic era, leaving evidence of their existence in flint tools and cave art. These early communities laid the foundations for societal structures that evolved over millennia. By the Neolithic period around 4000 BC, humans had developed farming, permanent settlements, and monumental architecture, including stone circles and burial chambers. Sites like Stonehenge and Avebury remain symbols of ingenuity and mystery, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and social organization. The arrival of the Celts introduced a new era, with a culture rooted in tribal organization, art, and mythology. Celtic languages and traditions spread across the islands, influencing everything from folklore to religious practices. Tribes like the Britons established fortified settlements and maintained their identity even as external pressures mounted. Their resilience would be tested in the coming centuries by one of history's most formidable military powers, the Romans. In 43 AD, the Roman Empire invaded, establishing Britannia as a province. Roman influence reshaped the landscape with roads, towns, and defensive structures, the most famous of which is Hadrian's Wall in the north. Roman law, architecture, and culture left an indelible mark on the inhabitants, even after the legions withdrew in the early 5th century. This withdrawal created a power vacuum that gave rise to the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Wessex, Mercia, and Northumbria emerged as dominant forces, bringing their language, customs, and governance structures that would influence English identity for centuries. During the Dark Ages, these kingdoms faced constant threats from Viking raids. Beginning in the late 8th century, Norse warriors attacked monasteries, towns, and villages, leaving destruction in their wake. However, the Vikings were not merely raiders. They settled, traded, and intermarried, especially in regions like the Danelaw. This period of conflict and integration left lasting marks on law, culture, and population distribution across the islands. Meanwhile, Scotland and Wales developed their own kingdoms, resisting invasions and creating unique social and political structures that persisted for centuries. The Norman conquest of 1066 dramatically reshaped England. William the Conqueror's victory at Hastings brought feudalism, centralized governance, and monumental architectural projects like the Tower of London. Norman influence extended far beyond the battlefield, affecting the language, law, and aristocratic culture of England. Over time, dynasties rose and fell, with the Plantagenets, Tudors, and Stuarts each leaving distinctive legacies in governance, culture, and religion. Henry VIII's Reformation, for instance, transformed England's spiritual and political landscape, severing ties with Rome and establishing the Church of England, a move with far-reaching consequences for society and monarchy alike. The medieval period was a time of both splendor and strife. Castles, cathedrals, and universities flourished, while battles, famines, and plagues tested the resilience of the population. Events like the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215 limited royal power and laid early foundations for constitutional governance. The 100 Years' War and the Wars of the Roses brought both turmoil and transformation, shaping the political and social fabric of England. In Scotland, the fight for independence from England produced iconic figures like William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, whose courage and strategy inspired generations. The early modern period ushered in the age of exploration, scientific inquiry, and empire building. Britain's naval prowess allowed it to establish colonies around the globe, facilitating trade and cultural exchange while also imposing control over foreign lands. The Industrial Revolution would later propel the UK to unprecedented economic power, transforming rural communities into industrial cities and reshaping society in every way, from labor and education to technology and urban life. Steam engines, textile mills, and railways became symbols of progress, and Britain emerged as a global powerhouse, influencing the course of world history. The 20th century brought both challenges and transformation. World Wars I and II tested Britain's resilience and forged a strong sense of national identity. Post-war reconstruction, the creation of the welfare state, and the gradual process of decolonization reshaped society and the nation's role in the world. Cultural contributions, from literature and art to music and film, ensured that Britain remained a center of global influence, while debates over national identity, immigration, and sovereignty continued to shape domestic and international politics. Today, the United Kingdom stands as a testament to endurance, adaptation, and evolution. Its history is not merely a record of rulers and battles, but a living narrative that continues to shape modern politics, society, and culture. The UK's story reminds us that the past is never far behind, influencing everything from parliamentary decisions to global diplomacy. By understanding its history, we gain insight not only into a nation, but also into the forces that have shaped the modern world. The story of the United Kingdom is complex, layered, and deeply human. It is a narrative of ambition, conflict, creativity, and resilience. A tale that reveals the interplay between geography, culture, leadership, and the indomitable spirit of its people. From ancient stone circles to bustling modern cities, from legendary kings to everyday citizens, the UK's history is a journey through time that continues to inspire curiosity, awe, and reflection. In the mists of prehistory, before kings and crowns, before the echo of English voices or the flight of Scottish banners, there was a land of mystery, a scattered group of islands on the edge of the known world. To the ancient people of Europe, this place was almost mythical. The Romans called it Britannia. The Greeks whispered of it as a land beyond the setting sun. But who truly were the first to call it home? Archaeologists still search for the answer. Buried deep in the soil of Wiltshire lie stones older than the pyramids, the Great Circle of Stonehenge. Its purpose remains one of humanity's oldest unsolved riddles. Was it a temple to the gods, a calendar of the heavens, or something far more spiritual? A bridge between the living and the dead? These stones, dragged across miles of rough terrain by people with no written language, hint at a civilization more advanced, more organized, and more mysterious than history often admits. As centuries passed, new tribes arrived. The Celts, fierce and proud, their traditions filled with music, magic, and blood. Their druids practiced sacred rituals in oak groves. Their warriors painted their bodies blue before battle, and their legends spoke of heroes who could shape destiny itself. But where did these Celts come from? Scholars debate it even now. Some say from Central Europe, others from the shadows of the Alps. Their arrival remains one of the great enigmas of British history, a people who vanished as mysteriously as they appeared. When Julius Caesar first glimpsed the white cliffs of Dover in 55 BC, he was not merely staring at new land. He was looking upon mystery itself. The Romans invaded decades later under Emperor Claudius, marching north through forests and moors, encountering people they could not fully conquer, the fierce tribes of the highlands and the western hills. In their wake, they built walls and roads, cities and villas. They brought Latin, coins, and governance. Yet for all their order and engineering, even the Romans could not tame the spirit of the island. Hadrian's Wall, stretching across the width of northern Britain, still stands as a testament, not only to Rome's might, but to its fear. Beyond that stone barrier lay Caledonia, the land of the Picts, painted warriors who moved like ghosts through the mist. The Romans never subdued them. Even at the height of empire, Britannia remained half-conquered, half-wild, an island that refused to yield its soul. When the legions withdrew in the 5th century, the island fell silent again. Roads decayed, cities emptied, and once proud Roman villas turned to ruin. Out of the ashes of empire, new forces rose, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. They came from across the sea, bringing iron, fire, and language. They reshaped the land, carving it into kingdoms, Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, each with its own lords, laws, and ambitions. Yet amid the rise of these new realms, the mystery deepened. Where did the old gods go? What happened to the Celts who had ruled before? Legends whisper of a king who united them all. Arthur, was he a myth or a memory? A single man or a symbol of resistance? The chronicles of the monks tell us of his sword, Excalibur, shining in battle against the Saxons, of his castle at Camelot, and of a Britain that stood together in a time of chaos. Some say Arthur never lived at all. Others believe his story was deliberately buried, rewritten by later kings who feared the power of his legend. By the time the Anglo-Saxons embraced Christianity in the 7th century, much of that ancient mystery had been lost or suppressed. Monasteries replaced sacred groves, and written scripture replaced oral legend. Yet deep beneath the cathedrals and abbeys, older stories slept. Stories of goddesses, spirits, and forgotten heroes who once ruled the forests and hills. Then came a new storm, the Vikings. They arrived not as distant traders but as thunder itself, their longships cutting through waves like blades. They burned monasteries, slaughtered priests, and seized treasures of gold and scripture alike. To the frightened monks who recorded these invasions, the Norsemen seemed like demons. But with their arrival came something else, a blending of worlds. The Norse and the Anglo-Saxons intermarried, traded, and merged customs. Towns like York became centers of both destruction and creation, where pagan myths met Christian hope. By the 9th century, England was a patchwork of rival powers, and in the midst of it all, one man began to dream of unity. Alfred of Wessex, later known as Alfred the Great. He fought the Danes, built fortresses, and commissioned the writing of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the first attempt to record the history of a people who had long lived in the fog of mystery. But the story of the United Kingdom was still only beginning. In the north, Scotland was emerging as its own kingdom, forged by alliances between Picts and Scots. In the west, Wales held tight to its independence, its language a living echo of the ancient Britons. And across the Irish Sea, new kingdoms were rising, destined to shape the island's future in blood and rebellion. The threads of the British Isles were weaving together, but no one yet realized what kind of tapestry they would form. The mystery of Britain was no longer just about stones or lost kings. It was about identity itself. Who were the British? Were they Romans, Saxons, Celts, or something entirely new, forged from all that came before? As centuries turned, one truth remained. Every invasion, every rebellion, every legend was not merely a story of conquest, but of survival. The land itself seemed to remember. The rivers, the hills, the ruins, all whispered of a destiny still hidden in the mist. And in that mist, the foundations of a kingdom were forming, one that would one day rule oceans, rewrite empires, and change the world forever. But before that kingdom could rise, it would have to survive betrayal, suspicion, and a power struggle that would decide the fate of every crown ever worn on British soil. The mystery that had long wrapped the islands now began to take shape, in castles, crowns, and blood. The year was 1066. The death of a king without an heir would ignite one of the most fateful battles in British history. 3 men claimed the English throne: Harold Godwinson, William of Normandy, and Harold Hardrada of Norway. It was a contest not just for power, but for destiny. At Hastings, the sky filled with arrows and the ground with bodies. When the dust settled, William the Conqueror stood victorious. England had fallen to a foreign power, and suspicion began to grow in every corner of the realm. Who truly ruled England now? The crown or the men behind it? William brought with him a system built on loyalty and fear. Feudalism. Land was no longer just soil, it was control. Every knight, every lord owed allegiance to the king, but that loyalty came at a price. Norman castles rose across the landscape, symbols of dominance and paranoia. The English people became strangers in their own land, their language and laws rewritten by the conquerors. Beneath this surface of order brewed resentment. Saxons whispered in the dark about rebellion. In the marshes and forests, hidden bands plotted revenge. The new Norman rulers built the Tower of London not only as a fortress, but as a warning. Every stone screamed power, every shadow whispered suspicion. As the centuries passed, the crown changed hands, but the distrust never left. The Plantagenets ruled with iron and intrigue. Henry II sought to strengthen royal authority, but found his reign haunted by one of the most shocking betrayals in history: the murder of Thomas Becket, Archbishop of Canterbury. The king's offhand words, "Will no one rid me of this troublesome priest?" became a death sentence. Becket was struck down inside his own cathedral, and with his blood spilled on sacred ground, suspicion poisoned the heart of the monarchy. To the people, the message was clear. Power in England came with divine cost. The church, once the moral anchor, now became both ally and adversary of the throne. Every coronation, every law, every war carried the weight of invisible struggle. Who held the true authority, God or the king? By the 13th century, that tension exploded into rebellion. King John, known for cruelty and corruption, faced a revolt from his own barons. Forced to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, he promised justice and limits to royal power. But behind this historic document lay layers of suspicion. The barons didn't trust the king didn't trust his lords, and the church watched both with wary eyes. The foundations of British liberty were born not from unity, but from mistrust. England's neighbors saw opportunity. Scotland's kings resisted English dominance fiercely. Under William Wallace and later Robert the Bruce, Scotland defied subjugation, winning victories that became legend. Yet even among their ranks, betrayal stalked in silence. Wallace was betrayed by his own countrymen, captured and executed in London, a grim warning carved into history. Wales, too, fought to remain free. Its rugged mountains sheltered rebel princes like Llywelyn the Great, who challenged English encroachment. But as the centuries passed, the Welsh principalities fell one by one, absorbed into England's expanding power. The more the English crown grew, the more suspicion festered among those it conquered. By the late Middle Ages, a darker storm brewed within England itself, the Wars of the Roses. The House of Lancaster and the House of York tore the country apart in a decades-long civil war for the throne. Brothers turned on brothers, allies became traitors, and the blood of nobles soaked the fields of England. The people lived in fear, unsure which rose, red or white, would rule tomorrow. The suspicion reached its peak with the rise of a cunning and calculating dynasty, the Tudors. Henry VII ended the Civil War with victory, but his rule began under the shadow of paranoia. Every surviving rival, every whisper of rebellion, was hunted down. He trusted no one completely, not even his allies. His court was a web of informants and spies, the beginning of England, his obsession with intelligence and secrecy. Then came his son, Henry VIII, bold, ambitious, and unpredictable. His hunger for power and legacy tore apart centuries of tradition. When the Pope denied him an annulment, Henry broke from Rome, declaring himself head of the Church of England. But beneath that declaration lay suspicion on a grand scale. He dissolved monasteries, executed nobles and priests, and surrounded himself with men he trusted one day, and beheaded the next. His wives suffered the same fate. 6 queens stood beside him, 2 were executed. Even his closest advisor, Thomas More, met the executioner's blade. Fear ruled the palace as much as the crown did. Yet in this age of suspicion, something extraordinary happened. The seeds of a nation's identity began to bloom. Out of fear came reform. Out of control came progress. England was no longer just a kingdom of warriors. It was becoming a kingdom of thinkers, explorers, and believers in destiny. But suspicion would not end with Henry's death. His daughter Elizabeth I inherited a throne drenched in conspiracy. Plots surrounded her, assassins, spies, and rival monarchs. She faced the Spanish Armada, traitors within her own court, and whispers of rebellion from Scotland and abroad. To survive, Elizabeth became the master of suspicion itself. She built a spy network that outwitted Europe's most powerful rulers. Under her reign, England entered a golden age of art, discovery, and empire. But every victory came at the cost of paranoia. Even as Shakespeare's plays filled theaters, the gallows stood ready outside. Suspicion had become the lifeblood of the British crown, and it would remain so for centuries to come. Beneath the glory and the crowns lay fear, calculation, and ambition. For every monarch who ruled with majesty, there were shadows behind the throne pulling the strings. The age of mystery had given birth to power, but power, as history would prove, always carried a secret price. The United Kingdom's story reaches its fiercest moment here. An age of power, empire, betrayal, and resilience that would define not only a nation, but the entire world. From kings who burned for glory to revolutions that shook the crown itself. This was the age when the kingdom's fate balanced on a knife's edge. The island that once fought for unity now faced the ultimate question. Could it hold itself together when the world itself was changing? The fires of ambition began to glow brightest in the late medieval era. The Plantagenet kings ruled England, claiming divine right, yet their hands were soaked in conflict. Wars with France raged for decades, shaping a new English identity in the heat of battle. The 100 Years' War, 1337-1453, wasn't just about territory, it was about pride. When the young Joan of Arc rallied France, England's dreams of continental empire began to fade. But war had already transformed the English soul, turning knights into soldiers, loyalty into nationalism. The idea of being English began to take form, not as a tribe, but as a people united under the crown. Then, as if cursed by its own ambition, England tore itself apart. The Wars of the Roses, 1455-1487, pitted family against family, the Red Rose of Lancaster against the White Rose of York. Brother killed brother, cousins turned traitor, and the throne changed hands like a cursed relic. The land bled for 30 years, but from this chaos rose one man who would finally bring order. Henry Tudor, crowned Henry VII, ended the Civil War, united the Roses, and founded the Tudor dynasty, the house that would define the coming age. Under his son, Henry VIII, the kingdom would face its most explosive transformation. Henry, bold, ruthless, and impossible to defy, changed not only his wives, but the very soul of England. When the Pope refused him a divorce, Henry turned his back on Rome and declared himself head of the Church of England. In one act, he broke the ancient bond with Catholic Europe and forged a new identity: Protestant England. Monasteries were torn down, fortunes seized, power centralized. It was a rebellion against the world, and it succeeded. England was no longer just a kingdom, it was an idea, independent and sovereign. But the flames Henry lit would not easily die. Religious wars tore through generations: Protestants versus Catholics, faith against faith, throne against conscience. When Queen Elizabeth III took the crown, she inherited a divided nation. Yet through cunning, charisma, and vision, she forged a golden age. Under her, England became fearless. Explorers sailed to the edge of the world: Francis Drake, Walter Raleigh, bringing tales of gold and empire. Art and culture blossomed. Shakespeare gave the people their voice. And when the mighty Spanish Armada came to crush England, Elizabeth stood unbroken. With courage and wind at her back, she turned a small island into a legend. But legends come with a price. After Elizabeth's death in 1603, the throne passed to James VI of Scotland, who became James I of England, uniting the crowns. For the first time, England and Scotland shared a king. It was not yet a political union, but the seed was sown. The United Kingdom was being born. However, unity brought not peace, but suspicion. James's son, Charles I, believed kings ruled by divine right. But the people, led by Parliament, began to whisper dangerous ideas. What if a king could be questioned? What if power belonged not to the crown, but to the people? The whispers became rebellion. The rebellion became war. The English Civil War erupted in 1642. Royalists versus parliamentarians, sword against sword. England was once again divided. But this time, it wasn't about roses. It was about liberty. And when the smoke cleared, the unthinkable happened. King Charles I was executed, a monarch beheaded by his own people. It was a moment that shook the world, the death of divine rule. For the first time in history, the people of England had overthrown their king, but chaos returned swiftly. The Republic under Oliver Cromwell became a dictatorship. England, without a crown, was like a body without a heart. And so, in 1660, the monarchy was restored, not because the king demanded it, but because the people needed it. The new kings ruled differently now, their power limited, their throne symbolic of balance, not domination. The lesson was clear: the crown would survive only by listening to the people it ruled. Then came the Great Union, 1707, when England and Scotland officially joined as the Kingdom of Great Britain. Soon after, Ireland too would be brought under the same flag. And from this island, once divided by tribes and warlords, rose a new identity: British. A kingdom now stood not just for itself, but for an empire. The British Empire spread across the globe, from India to Africa, from the Caribbean to Australia. The sun, they said, never set on it, and for a time it seemed true. Britain ruled the seas, traded with every continent, and built cities across the world. Its navy was unmatched, its wealth unrivaled, its influence global. But behind the glitter of empire, shadows grew. The Industrial Revolution, born in Britain's coal and steel, gave power and progress, but also poverty and pain. Factories rose, cities swelled, and children worked where men once ruled. While the rich grew richer, the poor toiled beneath the smoke of machines. It was a new kind of battle, not fought with swords, but with survival. Yet, from this suffering came strength, invention, reform, democracy. Britain's people demanded representation, and they got it. Step by step, the monarchy gave way to parliament, and the people took the reins of their destiny. Then came the empire's greatest test, the World Wars. In 1914, when Europe descended into chaos, Britain stood among the Allies, fighting for freedom and survival. Tens of thousands died in muddy trenches, and the empire's illusion of invincibility began to crack. After the war, the world changed. Monarchies fell, revolutions spread, but Britain endured. Barely 2 decades later, the world burned again. In 1939, when Hitler rose, Britain stood alone for a time, one island facing a continent of tyranny. Yet, under Winston Churchill, its spirit burned brighter than ever. Bombs fell on London, but the people never surrendered. Out of smoke and rubble came a voice that still echoes, "We shall never surrender." Victory came, but not without loss. The empire that once ruled the world began to dissolve. India gained independence. Africa followed. One by one, the jewels of the crown slipped away. But Britain adapted. It transformed from empire to ally, from ruler to partner. It chose diplomacy over domination, and though the empire faded, the idea of the United Kingdom endured, stronger, humbler, and more self-aware. The climax of its story isn't about kings or conquests anymore. It's about endurance. A nation that has reinvented itself through every era of history. From tribal mystery to global power, from monarchy to democracy, the United Kingdom has never stopped evolving. It is a kingdom not of borders, but of identity, forged in struggle, defined by resilience. A land that once conquered the world now leads by example, through culture, science, and the quiet strength of unity. And yet, the echoes remain. In its castles, in its cities, in its people, the ghosts of the past still whisper. They remind the world that power fades, but legacy endures. The crown may have changed, but it never truly fell. Because in the end, the true empire of Britain is not measured in land, but in the unbreakable will of the people who built it. When the cannons fell silent and the empire's maps began to shrink, something remarkable happened. The United Kingdom discovered a new kind of power. Not the power of swords or ships, but the power of influence. Its armies no longer marched across continents, yet its culture, language, science, and spirit began to flow through every corner of the earth. This was the dawn of a new empire, an empire of ideas. The British Empire had faded, but what it left behind was far more enduring. A global network of nations tied together by history, trade, and the English tongue. From Canada to India, from Australia to Africa, millions would grow up speaking English, studying Shakespeare, and governing under parliamentary systems modeled after Westminster. The crown no longer ruled them, but its legacy shaped their laws, their schools, and even their sense of justice. That was the paradox of Britain's power. Even as it withdrew from the world grew more British. At home, Britain was transforming again. The Second World War had not only tested its endurance, it had reshaped its soul. Cities lay in ruins, yet the people rebuilt from the ashes with quiet determination. From that pain rose compassion. The National Health Service, NHS, was founded, a revolutionary idea that healthcare should be free for all, rich or poor. It became one of the proudest symbols of British society, proof that even after war and loss, humanity could triumph over hierarchy. In those post-war years, the United Kingdom stood at a crossroads between its past and its future. Millions from the Commonwealth arrived to rebuild its cities and work its factories. Men and women from Jamaica, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and beyond. They brought new colors, new flavors, new rhythms, reshaping what it meant to be British. The streets of London, Birmingham, and Manchester became mosaics of cultures. At first, the transition was uneasy. Racism, division, and misunderstanding shadowed progress. But slowly, through the power of art, music, and community, a new voice began to rise. The voice of modern Britain, diverse and alive. Music became the nation's new weapon. From the Beatles to the Rolling Stones, from Queen to Elton John, British sound conquered the world. Its rhythm traveled farther than any empire ever could. The 1960s saw London become the heart of global youth culture, a symbol of freedom, rebellion, and reinvention. Fashion exploded, cinema evolved, and literature pushed boundaries. The United Kingdom had turned from conqueror to creator. It no longer needed to rule the world, because it had already inspired it. Yet, beneath the glitter, new tensions brewed. Industrial decline gripped the north, unemployment rose, and old mining towns faded into silence. The empire's wealth had not always been shared fairly, and now the reckoning came home. Social movements rose demanding equality, for workers, for women, for minorities. Britain, once the symbol of empire, was now learning to be the symbol of democracy in its truest form, messy, loud, and ever-evolving. Every protest, every debate, every reform, they all added another layer to the identity of the modern United Kingdom. And beyond its borders, the influence continued. British education became a passport to the world. Oxford and Cambridge stood as beacons of knowledge. British inventions, from the steam engine to the World Wide Web, continued to reshape humanity. Its literature gave voice to conscience, from Orwell's warnings against tyranny to J.K. Rowling's tales of courage. Its humor, its films, its television, from the dry wit of Monty Python to the emotional pull of The Crown, became global languages of storytelling. Through culture, Britain reached where politics never could, but influence is not the same as harmony. Inside the kingdom, new questions began to rise. What does it mean to be united? Scotland debated independence. Northern Ireland wrestled with painful memories of division and conflict, the troubles that tore communities apart. England and Wales faced their own struggles over identity, class, and change. The union that once conquered others now had to conquer itself, to remain whole, not by force, but by choice. And yet, despite every debate, something unbreakable endures. Because the idea of Britain has never been just about land or politics, it is about resilience. The resilience of a people who faced invasion, plague, fire, war, and still found a way to build, create, and endure. The resilience of a society that evolved from monarchy to democracy without losing its character. The resilience of generations who redefined what British meant, from the Celtic tribes of Albion to the multicultural citizens of today, London. Through every century, the United Kingdom has left fingerprints on the world in law, in language, in literature, in liberty itself. Its parliamentary system became a model for dozens of nations. Its moral struggles, from abolishing the slave trade to expanding human rights, inspired movements far beyond its shores. And even in its controversies, it taught the world something vital, that freedom is not a gift, but a constant fight. Today, when people speak English, when they drive on the left, when they watch football, or when they read the words of Shakespeare, they were touching echoes of Britain's legacy. Not the empire's shadow, but its enduring flame. A flame that survived the fall of kings, the crash of bombs, and the noise of modern politics. A flame that still burns in every heart that believes in perseverance, in progress, and in the quiet courage to rebuild. The United Kingdom's greatest impact was never in the lands it conquered, but in the values it spread. Freedom of thought, rule of law, equality before justice, and the right to question power. Those ideals became its truest crown, one no revolution could ever steal. And so, even as the modern world races forward, the United Kingdom's reflection lies everywhere. In the words people speak, in the music they sing, in the systems that govern them. Its story is no longer just history. It is a living influence that breathes in every culture touched by its past. The British Empire may have ended, but the British impact never did. From mist to monarchy, from empire to evolution, the story of the United Kingdom is the story of Surviva. It is a journey that began with scattered tribes and ended with a nation that shaped the modern world. A land that once waged war to unite itself now stands as proof that unity can outlast even time. But history never truly ends. It lives in every city street, every vote, every song sung at a football match, and every act of quiet courage in the face of change. The crown may shine less brightly than before, yet its meaning has deepened. It no longer rules the world but reminds it of resilience. So as we close this chapter, ask yourself, what makes a kingdom endure, power or purpose? What truly unites a people, fear or faith in the future? If you've traveled this far through time with us, you already hold the answer. History isn't just something we watch, it's something we continue.